At 2 in the morning, a stranger with blood on his knuckles saved me at a gas station, and I should have run the second I learned his last name. I didn't. Back then, all I knew was that 3 men had followed me out of the convenience store. One of them grabbed my wrist, and before I could even scream, somebody slammed the first man into the hood of a car, hard enough to make the whole station go quiet. I remember the fluorescent lights, the smell of gasoline, the cold air cutting through my jacket, and him, dark coat, sharp jaw, eyes like he had seen too much and trusted nothing. He didn't ask if I was okay right away. He looked at the men on the ground, then at me, and said, "Do you always wait this long before deciding to leave?" I should have been terrified. Instead, I said, "Do you always flirt after assault?" For the first time that night, he smiled. Small, unwilling, dangerous. Only when I'm impressed. My name is Ava Kensington. I was 28 years old, bartending nights and taking freelance photography jobs during the day, and by then, I had already learned the lesson life teaches some women too early. If you want to survive, don't trust charm, don't trust promises, and definitely don't trust men who look like trouble in expensive shoes. I had been hurt enough to build a life around caution. I lived alone in a small apartment above a tailor shop, kept a camera in my bag more often than makeup, and believed in cash, locked doors, and leaving first. But there was something about him that night I couldn't explain. Maybe it was the way he never touched me without asking. Maybe it was the way he stood between me and danger like it cost him nothing. Or maybe it was the exhaustion in his face, like violence was the language he had been born into and was already tired of speaking. "You need a ride?" he asked. "That depends," I said. "Are you the reason those men were following me?" He held my gaze for a second. No, that wasn't a very fast answer. It was honest. That should have been enough for me to leave. It wasn't. I let him drive me home. I know how that sounds. Stupid. Reckless. Exactly the kind of decision women later have to explain to people who've never been lonely in the right way. But loneliness makes strange things feel like safety. And that night, with adrenaline still burning through me, he felt safer than going upstairs alone, pretending my hands weren't still shaking. He never asked to come in. He just pulled up outside my building, looked at the dark windows and said, "You should replace the lock on the downstairs gate." I frowned. "Why?" "Because it sticks. I watched you struggle with it." I stared at him. "You notice everything, don't you?" He looked forward again. "I notice what might hurt people." That line stayed with me longer than it should have. I found out his name 3 days later. Dominic Rossi. Dom, if you were close enough to earn it. I wasn't. Not then. I only heard it because he walked into the bar where I worked on Friday night with 2 men who looked like they had never once in their lives been told no by a bouncer. The second one of the kitchen guys saw him. He muttered, "Rossi," under his breath like the room temperature had changed. That was how I learned what everybody else in Chicago seemed to know already. The Rossi family didn't just have money. They had the kind of power that made people lower their voices without realizing they had done it. Old restaurants, construction firms, waste routes, private security, half the city whispering one version of their name and the other half pretending not to know it. Dom sat at the far end of the bar like he didn't belong with the men he came in with. He watched me for 10 full seconds before I walked over and said, "So this is the part where I find out you're either in organized crime or your family owns an olive oil empire." He looked up at me and said, "Would it help if I said olive oil?" "Not really." "Then I won't insult your intelligence." I should have walked away right there. That would have been the smart thing. Instead, I poured him bourbon and said, "You saved me once. That doesn't buy you mystery." He picked up the glass. "Good. I hate owing people." "Funny," I said. "You look like a man people owe." "That's usually the problem." That was how it started. Not with a kiss, not with some sweeping confession, with looks that lasted too long, with arguments that turned into foreplay before either of us admitted it, with him showing up on nights he claimed were accidental and me pretending I didn't wait for the door to open. Dom was unlike anyone I had ever known. Not softer than he looked, just more tired. He carried danger like inheritance, not performance. He never bragged, never used his family name to impress me. If anything, he treated it like a stain he couldn't scrub off. One night, after he walked me home for the third time in a week, I asked him, "Why do you keep coming back?" He stood under the yellow streetlight outside my building, hands in his coat pockets, looking at me like I was asking for something he no longer trusted himself to say. "Because when I'm with you," he said finally, "I forget what I'm expected to be." That should have scared me more than it did. It didn't. It ruined me. We started seeing each other in secret, if you could call something that reckless a secret. Late-night diners, empty parking garages, drives with no destination, mornings where he left before sunrise because he said some worlds don't stay separate unless you force them to. He kissed like a man starved of gentleness and fought like a man raised without it. He was possessive sometimes, but never with me. Only with danger. Only with doors, exits, shadows, and men who looked too long. For the first time in my life, I felt protected without feeling owned. That distinction mattered more than he knew. I told myself I understood the risk. I didn't. I understood attraction. I understood secrecy. I did not yet understand blood. The first sign that loving him might cost me more than heartbreak came when my apartment was broken into. Nothing major was taken. That was the strange part. My camera bag had been opened. A drawer with old family papers had been pulled out. My laptop was untouched. Cash still there. It didn't feel like theft. It felt like someone was looking for something specific and hadn't found it. When Dom saw the mess, his whole body went still in a way that frightened me more than anger would have. "Who else has been in here?" he asked. "No one." "Think again." "Dom, Ava." He said my name so quietly it shut me up. I tried to think. "My landlord. Once. My friend Mara. That's it." He paced once across the room, jaw tight. "You're staying somewhere else tonight. That's not a suggestion, is it?" "No." "You want to explain why?" "Not yet." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That's becoming your favorite answer." He stepped closer. "And you're still here. Maybe I'm stupid." "No," he said. "If you were stupid, you'd trust me completely." That line stayed with me too. So did the way he didn't sleep at all that night. He sat in the chair by the motel window with a gun under his jacket and watched the parking lot until morning. A week later, he took me to dinner at a private place on the north side, and I met his father by accident. Or maybe it wasn't an accident at all. Vittorio Rossi entered the back room like the room belonged to him before it existed. Silver hair, perfect suit, a face too controlled to ever be called kind. He looked at me for 1 second too long, and then at Dom with a kind of calm disappointment I would later understand much better. "You've been busy," he said. Dom stood. We were leaving. Vittorio ignored him. "Miss Kensington," he said, "you seem intelligent. That usually makes things simpler." I smiled because fear has always made me sharper. In my experience, men only say that right before they become insulting. He actually seemed amused. "Then you do have instincts." Dom's voice changed. "Enough." His father looked at him then, and something passed between them I couldn't read yet. Not anger, not exactly. Recognition, history, obligation. The kind of conversation families have without words when they've been rehearsing their betrayals for decades. On the drive home, I asked, "What exactly does your father think I am?" Dom gripped the wheel a little tighter. "A problem." "That's flattering. It shouldn't be." "Then explain it." He said nothing for so long I looked at him and realized silence had finally become its own answer. That should have been the moment I ran. It wasn't, because by then I was already in love with him. And love, when it arrives after years of distrust, doesn't feel soft. It feels like hunger with nowhere safe to go. The truth started breaking open in pieces after that. A photograph first. I found it by accident in the bottom drawer of an antique desk at my grandmother's old house while helping clear it after she died. Most of it was junk, Receipts, old stamps, church programs, brittle postcards. Then I found one black and white photo of a woman I didn't know, holding a baby wrapped in a blanket with a symbol embroidered in one corner. I'd seen that symbol before, on a ring, on a man's wrist tattoo, on the inside door panel of a car Dom once drove and tried to hide too quickly when he saw me notice. When I showed the photo to my aunt, she went pale so fast I thought she might faint. "Where did you get that?" she asked. "In Grandma's desk." She sat down. "Your mother told us never to talk about it." That was the beginning, not the answer, just the tear in the fabric. Over the next week, I learned more than I wanted to. My mother had not died in some random robbery the way I had been told. My name had not always been Ava Kensington. There had been another name once, another family, another city. A violent night nobody in my adoptive family ever fully understood, except to know a child had survived something she was never supposed to remember. My aunt cried when she told me what little she knew. "Your grandmother took you because she thought if the right people found you, you wouldn't live long enough to grow up." I should have gone to the police. I called Dom instead. He arrived in less than 20 minutes, took one look at my face, and knew I knew something. "Say it," I told him. "Tell me why your father looked at me like that." He didn't answer. Dom, his eyes closed for 1 second. "Because he recognized the name before you changed it back." I felt the room tilt. "What does that mean?" He looked at me then, and whatever I saw in his face terrified me more than any lie would have. "It means you were born into the DeLuca family." I stared at him. The name meant enough even to me. The DeLucas were not just rivals to the Rossis. They were history, blood, unfinished wars, old graves people still made decisions around. "No," I said. "No." He took one step toward me. I stepped back. "How long have you known?" He didn't answer fast enough. That was answer enough. "How long?" I said again. "Since the second week I knew you." I laughed then, but it sounded broken even to me. "You knew? Ava, you knew and said nothing? I was trying to protect you." "From what?" He swallowed once. "From them, from my family, from what you mean." I stared at him. "What I mean?" His voice went rough. "You were never just a woman I met at a gas station." There it was, the line dividing my life into before and after. "Then what was I?" I asked. He looked like saying it would cost him something he had been trying to hold in for months. "At first," he said, "a target." The word hit like cold water. I couldn't breathe. "You were supposed to—" "What?" He said nothing. He didn't need to. "You were supposed to kill me?" My voice cracked hard enough to humiliate me. "No," he said immediately. "Not at first. Watch you. Confirm who you were. Stay close until they decided what to do. And then?" He looked straight at me. "Then I fell in love with you." I wish I could tell you that line healed something. It didn't. It broke me in a more intimate place, because I believed him, and that made it worse. I hit him. Not hard, not enough. Just once across the face, because there are some betrayals the body answers before the mind can. He didn't stop me. "How many times," I whispered, "did I tell you I don't trust anyone?" "I know. And you let me trust you anyway." His voice dropped. "I was trying to get you out." "Out of what?" He laughed once, bitter and tired. "Hell." I told him to leave. He did. That was the beginning of the part of the story where I should have become smart. Instead, I became dangerous. Because once grief and love mix with identity, fear starts making very reckless bargains. I didn't disappear. I didn't hide. I went looking. I started reviewing old photo drives and contact backups from a freelance job I had shot 3 months earlier, an event in a private club I had only gotten because the regular photographer was sick. At the time, I thought it had just been a strange job with too many armed men in suits pretending to be guests. Now I looked again. I zoomed in on corners, faces, reflections, timestamps. That was when I found it. Not one perfect smoking gun, something better. Vittorio Rossi in a back room with 2 men he publicly claimed to despise, and 1 federal intermediary he definitely should not have been meeting. Quiet hands, handshakes, folder exchange. Enough to ruin more than 1 life if the right people saw it. I didn't fully understand what I had yet, but I understood this. If Vittorio found out I had that footage, I would stop being a family problem and become a cleanup job. And he did find out. I knew because Dom showed up at my apartment at midnight with the face of a man trying to hold 2 disasters apart with his bare hands. "Pack a bag," he said. "No. Ava." No. I crossed my arms. You don't get to command me after lying to me for months. He looked wrecked, truly wrecked. If you stay here tonight, I may not be able to get to you first. That line silenced me. What happened? He stared at me. My father knows you have something. I felt my heartbeat in my throat. And? His answer came too slowly. He told me to handle it. The room went cold. Handle it, I repeated. He didn't move. You mean kill me? His voice was low. I said I'd do it. I laughed in disbelief. Why would you tell me that? He stepped closer, eyes burning in a way I had only seen once before. Because if I didn't, you'd never come with me. How do I know this isn't the part where you finally obey? He nodded once, like he had asked himself the same question all evening. You don't. That was the most honest thing he had ever given me, and somehow, it was enough. He took me to an abandoned warehouse on the river just before dawn. I knew exactly what it looked like, a setup, a place people disappear, a place where men with family names end things they don't want recorded. My hands were shaking, but not enough to drop the phone hidden inside my coat pocket. Because while Dom had been trying to save me his way, I had been preparing my own way too. If this is where I die, I said as we stepped into the dark, you could at least admit you have terrible taste in final locations. For the first time in hours, his mouth moved like it almost remembered how to smile. Still impossible, he muttered. We weren't alone long. Vittorio's men emerged from the shadows in clean coats and hard eyes. Then Vittorio himself, calm, irritated, certain. You always were sentimental, he told Dom. That was your weakness. Dom moved a fraction in front of me. No, he said quietly. You were. Vittorio's gaze shifted to me. You should have stayed lost. I should have been afraid. I was. But fear was no longer the loudest thing in me. So I took out my phone and said, I'm not the one who's going to die tonight. That got everyone's attention. I hit play. The video opened on Vittorio in the private room, speaking to men he had publicly sworn to destroy, discussing roots, leverage, and the quiet dismantling of his own bloodline in exchange for immunity and control. No drama, no gunshots, just the kind of betrayal powerful men commit when they think no one in the room is small enough to matter. Dom didn't even look surprised. That hurt and relieved me at the same time. He had guessed, maybe always known. Vittorio's face changed by less than an inch, but in that world, that was a collapse. You don't know what you have, he said. No, I answered. I know exactly what I have. The question is whether the rest of your family gets to see it before sunrise. One of his captains shifted, then another. That was the real power move, not exposing Vittorio to the law, but exposing him to his own wolves. Dom stepped fully in front of me then, not to hide me, but to stand beside the choice he was making. I'm done, he said, with all of it. Vittorio looked at him like grief and contempt had finally found the same face. For her? Dom didn't hesitate. For myself. That mattered more than anything. Because I had never wanted him to choose me instead of himself. I wanted him to choose the part of himself that was still worth saving. The negotiation that followed was not clean, and it was not heroic. Real power never leaves the room beautifully. Vittorio was not killed. That would have made too easy a legend of him. Instead, he was forced out. Retirement disguised as transition. Authority transferred. Old men in good suits deciding a dynasty mattered more than one father's hunger. Dom refused the throne they tried to hand him after. That was his final rebellion. He took only what was already his, and only the clean parts. Money he had buried quietly over years, legal investments, documents, enough to leave without crawling. 6 months later, we were living outside Chicago, in a small house near a lake that froze silver in the morning light. Dom opened a legitimate security consulting firm with 2 former men from his old world who had wanted out almost as badly as he had. I kept bartending part-time at first and returned to photography slowly, differently. Less nightlife, more portraits, more families, strangely. More people trying to hold on to something good before life scared it out of them. Love did not become easy after that. That's not how stories like ours work. I didn't magically trust him because he had chosen me in a warehouse full of guns. He didn't become soft because he had finally stepped out of hell. We had to build everything by hand. Truth, routine, apology, boundaries. There were nights I woke up angry again. There were mornings he looked at the lake too long, and I knew some part of him was still counting exits. But there was also peace, real peace, the earned kind, the kind that arrives only after two people stop lying about what it costs to stay alive. Sometimes I think back to the gas station, to blood on his knuckles, to my own stupid mouth asking if he always flirted after assault. I should have run the night I met him. I didn't. Loving him almost destroyed me. But it also forced me to become the woman I would never have become if I had kept living inside fear. I didn't fall for the devil. I fell for the man trying to climb out of hell. And maybe that sounds foolish. Maybe it is. But this wasn't revenge on them. It wasn't revenge on his father, or on the family that thought my bloodline made me disposable, or on the girl I used to be who confused distance with safety. This was my quiet revenge on the scared version of myself, the one who thought survival meant never trusting anyone deeply enough to lose them. I did lose things. Certainty, innocence, a whole invented past. But in the end, I got something I never dared to believe I could have. A life that was mine. A love that had been chosen at a cost. And a future I was no longer afraid to step into. I should have run the night I met him. Instead, I stayed. And somehow, that was what saved me.